Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here is your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Faith in Our Hometown. I hope your Sunday morning, this beautiful June day, is pleasant. And if it's not, I hope we're going to make it a little bit more pleasant. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about where faith and in some ways where politics and public service all start to come together. And I've got a great guest on this morning who many of you know at least by reputation throughout our service area, and that is former Senator Ron Richard. Senator Richard was the former president of the Missouri Senate. He was the former Speaker of the House, and the only one in Missouri history to have done that, and only one of about 5 people throughout the country who've ever been the head of both of those houses, both of those chambers of our state government. And so he's got some experience, and he's got a little bit of wisdom, but he's also retired now from those jobs, and hopefully a little bit of a wisdom figure for it. So we're going to pick his brain here in a little bit when we come back right after this Mercy Minute. So grab your cup of coffee and come on back, and we're going to be talking with Senator Ron Richard.
The dreaded tagged photo. I married the love of my life in October, and when I got home that night, I saw this. Frankly, this is every obese person's worst nightmare. You have no control, none, over what other people post. And up until that day, I'd been very careful about how I presented myself on social media. In fact, I generally only posted photos like this. What's sad is that I haven't always been like this. Confession, I've been a yo-yo dieter for roughly 10 years. When I met this amazing guy 3 years ago, he didn't care how much I weighed, but he did care about my health. A month after our wedding, I talked to my doctor and my journey began. Here's an honest and usually pretty entertaining look at how I got to bariatric surgery and beyond. Buckle up, check out my blog, Confessions of a Yo-Yo Dieter.
She don't like to talk about it.
Well, my guest this morning, Senator Ron Richard. Ron, thank you for coming out of semi-retirement, I guess that's what you're doing these days, to have a little bit of a conversation.
Father Jay, it's always nice to be with you.
Yeah. Well, you have got lots of experience. You were in city politics, you were in state politics for many, many years, and you did a great job of service for all of us. So thank you for your service to the people of the state of Missouri and to the world in that regard, because we contribute our piece too. But I just want to talk with you a little bit because we batted this around just lightly in social settings. I just think that there's a lot of acrimony these days in public service. A lot of people are really busy trying to, spit at the other people or the other party, or the us versus them. And even though I know there's party affiliations, and I know that's in so many ways how people get elected to office, is that really what should be at the heart of public service? In so many ways, is service to the party, or who are we trying to serve here? What's that all about?
Well, what's going on in politics now is not new. I mean, you go back in history, President Polk and his campaign was absolutely horrible. They called each other names and did things that would make us shrinking violence now. Abraham Lincoln's election. There's a number of it. It's just the pendulum swings in politics back and forth, and 24-hour news cycle has created a lot of this because it doesn't take much to get a headline on 24-hour news, and so that's what happened when I started in 2002. We took the majority over, but I never dealt that way. My main focus always was job creation and job retention, and
everybody should win if some of that happens.
When we took majority over, 2002, I had some experience with economic development in Joplin. So in 2004, the Speaker of the House put me as chair of the economic development, and then I had a meeting early on that year, and I said, I know we're not going to agree on a lot of these issues, but everybody wants a job for people in your area. So why don't we come together and figure out how to do that and be a win-win for everybody, and we're not going to get into those issues that cause some acrimony And that's how I started. It's always been a win-win, and that's what I've always tried to do. Whether I was in leadership or a chairman or head of the House Senate, always focused on job creation, job development. And I figured if people had a good job, they'd go home and feel better about themselves. They would hopefully treat their family better if they were having issues at home. Charitable contributions get better. And I thought it was just what'd you say, Father, a win-win for everybody. And that's what I did all the way up till when I was term limited last December.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting to me because I one of these things that we always talk about in our Catholic, theology of public life and all those things is the common good. How do we appeal to the common good? How do we do the best for everybody? Trying to make if you will, trying to make the boat rise for the whole thing rather than just this group or that group or this person or that person. How do we do that? Which is one of the roles of government. At least St. Thomas Aquinas did tell us that to be one of the roles of government was to make sure that we were taking care of the common good.
Well, yes and no. I mean, you're talking a little bit of socialism too.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily the common good. I mean, if you make the platform even for everybody, you take out the incentive to excel.
Right.
So.
But in some ways, and again, strict socialism in terms of the way that I've seen it happen in terms of the experiment. Yeah, I would agree with you. I think there's some disenfranchising things about socialism that was practiced in other parts of the world. But some people would accuse Jesus of being a socialist too, in terms of his care for everybody else, and saying love God and love your neighbor. And even the early church, sometimes people would pick at the early church and say, well, it just depends on who you are. If you're a socialist, you want to say, look, Jesus was a socialist right here, and if not, you're going to be looking at some of those things. But I mean, I do think that there is something we can hang our hat on in terms of trying to make sure that the common good works without disenfranchising people and not giving them an incentive to move forward. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the early church, I don't know if that's a really good example. I mean, they had their own issues.
Sure they did.
We won't get into that. But let me give an example of a common good that I thought was good for everybody. About 4 years ago, before I was president of the Senate, I was majority leader of the Senate, which took the legislation, decided when it would come up for debate and how long it would be debated. We were talking about 72-hour wait on abortion. And I had the senator that did that was David Sater from Cassville. And I had it up 6 times during the session. And there was some on our side of the aisle that didn't want to proceed, and they were pretty quiet. There's some on the other side of the aisle that wanted to proceed, but they couldn't get too vocal about it. But I got along with everybody, and they talked to me about it. So we threatened a parliamentary procedure of moving the previous question, which I needed to get something going. Finally, the 6th time we had this legislation up is 10 or 11 o'clock at night. A senator from another part of the state came up and said, I think we're going to let this thing go because we think we can beat it in court. I said, well, I don't think you can, but that's fine. And we passed it, and then it went to court, and of course we won. But there could have been, that was a defining moment because that issue is polarizing for some and not for me. I mean, I'm Catholic my whole life.
Sure.
I don't wear it on my shirt sleeve, and I don't advertise it. But you try to, hopefully by your actions, you'll send a message that you can be dealt with fairly and openly. And I've been in Catholic schools in Parsons, Kansas, where we started. And I was raised in Joplin, St. Louis, Chicago. I've served Mass all over. I served Mass at a long time, Father Inglesby at St. Peter's years ago, and I think I served every solemn high requiem Mass there ever was in 3-hour dudes, but they were tough.
That's where you got your stamina.
Well, it took some. But other than that, I'm getting away from that legislation. Sometimes a defining moment looking back, that was one of our better achievements, I think. And the senator from Cassville, David Sater, did a great job. And again, what was important to understand is some on the other side of the aisle wanted us to succeed, but couldn't say anything. I knew where the votes were, and it just took a little time to work things out. But there wasn't, you didn't see it in the newspaper, me calling people out or anything else, and sometimes it just works out over time.
Yeah, and again, I guess when I first started looking at, certain things in politics, I guess I understood that there was always going to be some give and take to accomplish something. In some ways, there was enough compromise along the way to, that I realized that I grew up thinking that neither party was going to get exactly what they wanted, but yet we were going to come up with something that would
you
do
get
that.
everything you want, very seldom. But I always dealt, when I learned from people in the House of Representatives, people who's been there that helped us get the majority. You stand on the shoulders of others. You just don't do this by yourself. I believe that incrementalism was very important. If you take a bite of it now, bite of the apple, and you get a little piece of it, the next session you get a little bite, and that's what we did with job creation. That's what we did with some pro-life issues. That's what we did with some transportation issues. And you look back in 8 or 10, 12 years, and a lot of things are done. And that's a massive step in getting these things done. Well, it really wasn't. It was a little piece, a little bit, and just have to kind of work it and find an opening. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But as long as you remember, in the House it takes 82 to pass anything, and the Senate takes 18. And you got to make sure that you give and take among your own members plus others too.
Yeah, and again, I'm sure you got plenty of stories about being able to do certain things that you really thought were for the good. That you had not everybody. Guess not everybody in your party was always on the same side with you either, and sometimes you had allies from across the aisle, as they'd say.
Yeah. We had a Second Amendment gun bill some years ago when I was majority leader, and that tends to polarize people all the time. Always has.
Yeah.
But we had some legislation that, I don't even remember who was doing it, and it was unconstitutional. And part of it was that it wouldn't let drug enforcement from the Fed and the state and the local all work together. It would prohibit that. And then, if you had a child in school and you had some event happen that you needed to see your kid, you had maybe a live shoot or something, you couldn't go, and the principal or the teachers couldn't let you know what's going on to your own kid, private, public school, whatever. And there was some other language that was unconstitutional. So Tom Dempsey, who was president of the Senate then, and I wouldn't vote for it, which they needed our 2 votes to pass it. And we didn't allow that to happen. I caught a lot of grief over that for a year, but it's still the right thing to do. Sometimes you got to have a gut check and check in your heart, and you got to do the right thing. And I always thought in my heart I did the right thing.
Yeah. Well, our guest this morning is Senator Ron Richard, recently retired, if you will, from the Missouri Senate. And we're going to be right back after a quick break. If you will just stick with us. We're talking a little bit this morning about the common
You're
good.
watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service of Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
So again, Ron, thanks for coming on and talking about some of these things this morning. We're just trying to, to figure out, how does all that work? Because, several years ago, now St. John Paul II, we had a few priests in Congress and things like that, especially from the Northeast, and And John Paul basically just said, I want all of you out of politics.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why he wanted us all out of politics is he said, you can't, in some ways, you can't, I don't see how you can get elected by a party without compromising some of your values when it comes to a platform. You know, how would you do that? And you were talking about just a minute ago before we got to the break about always trying to do the right thing. And I'm sure that these other, these priests who were serving in, public office at that point in time in the U.S., Congress at that point in time, were trying to do the same thing. But that's one of the reasons why he told priests to stay out of politics and to leave that to people like you, who are willing to wade in and to do what they can. Do you think that's was a fair assessment of now St. John Paul II that we probably couldn't, there would be some compromise if you're gonna try to stick with strict gospel values? How do you do all that?
That happens anyway with people in the House and the Senate that have beliefs on issues that make any difference you wear a collar or not. I mean, there's a couple members of I call the cloth on the city council. There's in the House, there's a couple of preachers part-time and not in the Senate just yet. I mean, and they'll be as adamant and for their feelings just as someone on the other side that may be an atheist or something. So you just kind of let the debate go. I never thought that was a big deal. Of course, I never served with a Catholic priest or anything on in the House or Senate, but I'm sure you'd have to make some tough votes, or not you vote no, or in the Senate, you could abstain, but it's not really a good idea. I mean, abstain is lacking your sworn oath to make a vote for the people elected. In the House, you always push a button because there's 163, and it's red, no, green, yes, yellow, abstain. There's a whole bunch of people who abstain because I got election I got to think about. I'm nervous about this. I mean, you don't have to be a man of the cloth or a woman of the cloth to abstain or and take a position. We have a lot of issues with people that just don't want to take a position. And when you're working to get 82 in the House, that can be something that you really need to watch, because there's a lot of people don't want to be in the press. If they do, they want to be on the right side of it. So
they want to be popular if they're going to be in the press.
Yeah. It's politics is a interesting life.
Yeah, that was one of those things. I've got to say. I mean, I don't mind doing this, but I would never done what you did. So that's why I'm grateful. I mean, that you and other people do it.
I've seen priests and nuns do their job, and there's a lot of politics in that. So.
Oh, there are plenty of politics. I'm not saying that, but I mean, at the end of the day, I don't get elected. It's not a popular vote, for me. I guess there's a bit of a popular vote if people start to withdraw their contributions. There are some of that.
Well, yeah, or send a note to the bishop or something and say, out of here,
And again, that doesn't happen. That happens in such rare occasions that I really never have to worry about that part, And again, it's just like if you want to be in, and I see the challenge to that is, if you want to be elected and. It's just like I couldn't be. I mean, if I had to be elected by either party, I don't think I could be elected by either party, because there are things in both platforms that I find objectionable.
And you find things you like in both platforms.
Exactly,
so
absolutely.
You just have to. And when the best thing people can do in any line of work, but when you get in politics, is you keep your word and you're trustworthy. And you give your word to somebody, that's all you really have at the end of the day. And in your line of work too. Really, that's the end of the day. That's really all you have is your word. I mean, you can talk about this and be a good example of that, but if your word's not your bond, and if you don't act out your word, I mean, what value are you?
Well, nobody is going to trust you.
Yeah, and that's
and I guess they shouldn't vote for you if they don't trust you.
I like to think that I always spoke was on my mind. And I've been criticized. I'm very frank about it now. I don't really have a temper. I mean, sometimes I had the appearance of a temper, but sometimes in politics, when you're a crowd, and I've seen you on a service, sometimes it's theater.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of theater to it.
And sometimes you do that to get a reaction good. Sometimes you do it to energize your members. Sometimes I was always the bad guy in the House and Senate. So the majority leader in the House and Senate would go work a deal. I was always, we'd get to a point and it looked like there was no end, and I'd rant and rave or do this or go in the hallways, and we always chuckle about it later. But then the majority leader, and one of the best majority leaders I served with is Mike Kehoe, who's a Catholic from Jefferson City, who's now lieutenant governor, and he was a car dealer, Ford car dealer. So by nature, he was a wheeler dealer.
He was a salesman, yeah.
So when I went and took a position, he and I would talk. I said, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to get everybody excited, and you go make a deal. And it worked almost flawlessly. I mean, we had a nice time, and we chuckle about it. We were on the phone today, chuckling about some of the times.
Well, you know, and again, I think that was the era that I grew up in. Is you watch people really trying to do something. Now, again, that you're not going to give up some of your core values. You're not going to do that. But I mean, but you had to realize that if you're going to get something done and do something, at least as I would say, because you thought it was for the good of the state or the people of the state, and you thought that that was what would happen, you'd take that stand and you'd try to move people to do that.
Yeah, I never asked anyone for a vote if it was a core belief of yours, whatever it was. If that was something you really believed in, don't vote with me. I'll go get a vote somewhere else. And then the criticisms or the some of the press. I always had a saying. I wish I'd used it more and more. As an old Persian saying, "A shallow brook babbles the loudest." There's some of that. Members are elected, but a lot of it's the press and stuff who try to get a reaction sometimes, and sometimes you give it, sometimes you don't.
Yeah, and you know, and again, trying to just move people to do something. I mean, I'm sure that if we picked an issue, or depending on which one we picked, we disagree about the best way to go about doing that, or whether or not we even thought that that was the right way to go, or the right direction to happen there.
But if you had that issue and it was in the legislature, you send it out for debate, and generally you'll figure out the right way it works. Sometimes then you pull it back, send it out again, just like we're talking about that 72-hour abortion wait. Generally, good legislation will find a way, and maybe it's not this year, maybe it's next year.
Yeah.
You gotta
And
be
again,
patient.
sometimes to do some of that stuff, and again, knowing how the politics works, I think is. I think that sometimes I think even in the recent climate, sometimes that's where people have gotten themselves in some trouble. Is they wanted to do something, but couldn't figure out how to get the mechanism to work in their favor to do some of the things that they wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because I know I'd botch that I'd have to learn how it worked even better, on the political side of things.
You'd be good in debate because you're at ease with the English language.
Well, I talk for a living, but yeah.
But the weapon people have is the vocabulary of the English language, and if you can cut somebody to the bone, and like for example, I called one guy on the floor. He was an unadulterated prevaricator. Well, no,
My mother used to call me that from time to time.
I learned that from a nun at Macaulay, Sister DePaul, and I said, "Well, what is that?" It means you're a liar. But when you said that, an unadulterated prevaricator, they didn't know what you were saying. They didn't know it. And you didn't really call a guy out. They had to call, "What'd you say?" "Well, I said this and this." "Well, why didn't you just call us?" "I wouldn't do that to you. I don't want to embarrass you because I may need your vote tomorrow." And we kind of chuckled and went on.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom used to have all kinds of things. She'd call me one thing in public and she'd say something else in private.
Yeah.
It was one of those things. And she worked in a Catholic school for 50 years, so maybe she had some of those same nuns teaching her how to do some of those things.
Sister Charity and Sister Mercy, they were the tough ones.
Yeah, well, the mom, of course, got in when the nuns were starting to lose some of their numbers, and she was one of the lay people that got in order to help them out. And by the time she got finished, of course, she was one of the ones that was helping run it for that same reason, because they weren't there.
That's where you got that management style, right? Have to run everything?
Well, she did show me how some of that stuff works.
Yeah, I'm sure she did.
Yeah, and again, like you said, I mean, there are politics, and there's politics in a parish. There's how do you get something done? How do you lead people to do something that they don't want to do?
There's
How can you
politics
get
at
it?
home. I mean, Patty, my wife, you don't think there's politics at home?
Well, I would bet that she wins most of those battles.
She does, but because you're smarter than I am.
Well, there you go.
So, sometimes you realize the intelligence and you go their way.
Yeah. But again, I think there's got to be, I just wish that the dialogue were a little less,
It was for show. I mean, if there wasn't the 24-hour television
news cycle.
these guys, these ladies, they wouldn't be doing that because and the funny thing about it, every time somebody got elected, when I was elected, they already wanted to reach for the chairmanship or they want to be the speaker or president and, make that step too far. And you got to work your way to it and have the people trust. These men and women doing that, they want to be in charge, and the thing they're going to have to understand of this acrimony sooner or later is going to make them not in charge.
Yeah. Well, I do think there are ways we should treat each other and ways not. And again, I'm a little bit of an idealist in that way.
No, it's okay, but in debate, it's all fair game.
Yeah, that's true.
As long as you don't question someone's ethics or you don't question their reason for what they're voting, but when you get to debate, I mean, it's all fair. Go for it.
Well, my guest this morning, Senator Ron Richard, retired from the Missouri Senate and former Speaker of the House as well. We're going to be right back for a wrap-up after this Mercy Minute.
You don't realize how much weight you put on until it's gone. I'm Katie Dahl. I work in the emergency room at Mercy Joplin. I'm a nurse. I've been there for 8 years. I love my job. I think I have the best job in the world because I get to take care of people every single day. I had gastric bypass surgery almost a year ago. I have lost a total of 130 pounds. 30 pounds I lost before surgery with diet and exercise. It's not been easy. The surgery definitely has helped it come off easier, but I still have to, watch what I eat, still have to exercise. I have a lot more energy. I can move around. My body doesn't ache anymore like it used to. I was pre-diabetic and now my blood sugars are all good and I'm not worried about being pre-diabetic anymore. I feel like I was when I was younger in high school and in my teenage years, just getting back to where I feel comfortable in my own skin now.
Well, thank you for joining us again for another Sunday morning here at Faith in Our Hometown. My guest this morning, Senator Ron Richard, retired after many years in public service. Over the break, Ron said something again, reminded me of something that's very true, and he said, freedom isn't free, you got to work at it. It's a difficult thing to do, and it's hard for all of us to have to try to figure out how to make it work together. There are ways to do that I can applaud. There are ways sometimes that I'm not too fond of. But the point is that we've still got to continue to stay in there together. We've got a great experiment going here in our country. I still can't figure out where else I'd rather live, even as bad as sometimes the fighting gets. We do have to fight about the things that we care about, and we'll continue to do it. Have a great rest of your Sunday, and join us again next week for Faith in Our Hometown.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.